Hello everyone, today we're reading 2 Kings chapter 13 to 18. Now, it's about to get really intense in Kings, if it hasn't been intense enough. It's about to be real intense. Like, we've been reading about, Edom and Aram, all those guys fighting against Israel and Judah and Israel versus each other, all of that stuff, Ahab, Jezebel, Elisha, and Elijah. Now, we're about to start reading about the exiles, like Assyria and Babylon, which Babylon doesn't appear in this at all, but Assyria is going to. We're about to see the northern kingdom of Israel get overthrown pretty much by Assyria in this video. So things are starting to get drastic and dreadful for the Israelites. And first chapter is the death of a very prominent prophet, Elisha. Elisha dies in the first chapter we're reading today, chapter 13, verse 20. Elisha dies, and but towards the end of the video, we start talking about this guy named Hezekiah, who was a really good king. So let's start reading. In the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoaz, son of Jehu, became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, and he did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad his son. Then Jehoaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes So the Israelites lived in their own home as they had before, but they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which had caused Israel to commit. They continued in them. Also the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. Nothing had been left of the army of Jehoaz, except 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, for the king of Aram had destroyed the rest and made them like the dust at threshing time. As for the other events of the reign of Jehoaz, all he did and his achievements, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and Jehoash, his son, succeeded him as king. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He continued in them. As for the other events of the reign of Jehoash, all he did and his achievements, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoash rested with his ancestors, and Jeroboam succeeded him on the throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. Jehoash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. my father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Elisha said, "Get a bow and some arrows," and he did so. "Take the bow in your hands," he said to the king of Israel. When he had taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's bow. Not on the king's bow, on the king's hands. "Open the east window," he said. And he opened it. "Shoot," Elisha said. And he shot. "The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Aram," Elisha declared. "You will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek." Then he said, "Take the arrows," and the king took them. Elisha told him, "Strike the ground." He struck it 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you would defeat it only 3 times. Elisha died and was buried. Now Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. Once, while some Israelites were burying the man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bone, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. Hazael, king of Aram, oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoaz, but the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion and showed concern for them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To this day, he has been unwilling to destroy them or banish them from his presence. Hazael, king of Aram, died, and Ben-Hadad, his son, succeeded him as king. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, recaptured from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns he had taken in battle from his father Jehoaz. 3 times Jehoash defeated him, and so he recovered the Israelite towns. In the 2nd year of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, and Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Jehoiadin. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. In everything he followed the example of his father Joash. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. After the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father the king, yet he did not put the children of the assassins to death, in accordance with what is written in the book of the law of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin." He was the one who defeated 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and captured Selah in battle, calling it Joktheel, the name it has to this day. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, with the challenge, "Come, let us face each other in battle." But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah, "A thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon, 'Give your daughter to my son in marriage.' Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle underfoot. You have indeed defeated Edom, and now you are arrogant. Glory in your victory, but stay at home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall and that of Judah also?" Amaziah, however, would not listen. So Jehoash, king of Israel, attacked. He and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced each other at Beth Shemesh in Judah. Judah was routed by Israel, and every man fled to his home. Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh. Then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section about 400 cubits long. He took all the gold and silver and all the articles found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. He took also hostages and returned to Samaria. As for the other events of the reign of Jehoash, what he did and all his achievements, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoash rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son succeeded him as king. This is Jeroboam the second, by the way. Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. As for the other events of Amaziah's reign, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? They conspired against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. He was brought back by horse and was buried in Jerusalem with his ancestors in the city of David. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. He was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after Amaziah rested with his ancestors. In the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-hepher, same Jonah who wrote the book of Jonah that we just read earlier. The Lord had seen how bitterly everyone in Israel, whether slave or free, was suffering. There was no one to help them, and since the Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. As for the other events of Jeroboam's reign, all he did in his military achievements, including how he recovered for Israel both Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jeroboam rested with his ancestors, the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son succeeded him as king. Now here's where a lot of kings come in. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jechaliah. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. The Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, and he lived in a separate house. Jotham, the king's son, had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. As for the other events of Azariah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Azariah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in the city of David, and Jotham his son succeeded him as king. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 6 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his predecessors had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah, he attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. The other events of Zechariah's reign are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Shallum son of Jabesh became king in the 39th year of Uzziah king of Judah, and he reigned in Samaria 1 month. Then Menahem son of Gadi went from Tirzah up to Samaria. He attacked Shallum son of Jabesh in Samaria, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. The other events of Shallum's reign and the conspiracy he led are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. At that time, Menahem starting out from Tirzah, attacked Tifsah and everyone in the city and its vicinity, because they refused to open the gates. He attacked Tifsah and ripped open all the pregnant women. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem son of Gadi became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 10 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Then Pul, king of Assyria, invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom. Menahem exacted this money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer. As for the other events of Menahem's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Menahem rested with his ancestors, and Pekahiah his son succeeded him as king. In the 50th year of Azariah king of Judah, Pekahiah son of Menahem became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 2 years. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. One of his chief officers, Pekah son of Remaliah, conspired against him, taking 50 men of Gilead with him. He assassinated Pekahiah along with Argob and Ariah in the citadel of the royal palace at Samaria. So Pekah killed Pekahiah and succeeded him as king. The other events of Pekahiah's reign and all he did are written in the book of the annals of the king of Israel. In the 52nd year of Azariah king of Judah, Pekah son of Remaliah became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 20 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. In the time of Pekah king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth-Makkah, Janoah, Kadesh, and Hazar. He took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. He attacked and assassinated him, and then succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. As for the other events of Pekah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Just straight Israel. Now we're on the Judah king again. In the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. As for the other events of Jotham's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? In those days the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Judah. Jotham rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, the city of his father, and Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places on the hilltops and under every spreading tree. Then Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz, but they could not overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram by driving out the people of Judah, the Edomites, then moved into Elath and have lived there to this day. Ahaz sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and of the king of Israel who are attacking me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser. king of Assyria, he saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar, which detailed plans for its construction. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with all the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered up his burnt offering and grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and splashed the blood of his fellowship offerings against the altar. As for the bronze altar that stood before the Lord, he brought it from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the new altar. King Ahaz then gave these orders to Uriah the priest. On the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, and the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering. Splash against this altar the blood of all the burnt offerings and sacrifices, but I will use this bronze altar for seeking guidance. And Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had ordered. King Ahaz cut off the side panels and removed the basins from the movable stands. He removed the sea from the bronze bulls that supported it and set it on a stone base. He took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple and removed the royal entryway outside the temple of the Lord in deference to the king of Assyria. As for the other events of the reign of Ahaz and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son succeeded him as king. In the 12th year of Ahaz king of Judah, Hoshea son of Elah became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser king of Assyria came up to attack Hoshea, who had been Shalmaneser's vassal and had paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea was a traitor, for he had sent envoys to So, king of Egypt, and had no longer paid tribute to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore Shalmaneser seized him and put him in prison. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halah and Gozan, on the Harbor River, and in the towns of the Medes. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They worshipped other gods and followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices that the kings of Israel had introduced. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. At every high place they burned incense, as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers, "Turn away from your evil ways. Observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants the prophets." But they would not listen, and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, "Do not do as they do." They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idols cast in the shapes of cows and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry host, and they worshipped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed from them his presence. Only the tribe of Judah was left, and even Judah did not keep the commands of the Lord their God. They followed the practices Israel had introduced. Therefore the Lord rejected all the people of Israel. He afflicted them and gave them into the hands of plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. When he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam son of Nebat their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned them through all his servants the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. The king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took over Samaria and lived in its towns. When they first lived there, they did not worship the Lord, so he sent lions among them, and they killed some of the people. It was reported to the king of Assyria, "The people you reportedly settled in the towns of Samaria do not know what the God of that country requires. He has sent lions among them, which are killing them off because the people do not know what he requires." Then the king of Assyria gave this order: "Have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires." So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria came to live in Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. Nevertheless, each national group made its own gods in the several towns where they settled and set them up in the shrines. The people of Samaria had made at the high places. The people from Babylon made Succoth-Benoth. Those from Cutha made Nergal, and those from Hamath made Ashima. The Avites made Nibhaz from Toktak, and the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire as sacrifices to Adram-Melech and Anam-Melech, the gods of Seraphim-Vaim. They worshipped the Lord, but they also appointed all sorts of their own people to officiate for them as priests in the shrines as the high places. They worshipped the Lord, but they also served their own gods in accordance with the customs of the nations from which they had been brought. To this day, they persist in their former practices. They neither worship the Lord nor adhere to the decrees and regulations, the laws and commands that the Lord gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel. When the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites, he commanded them, "Do not worship any other gods or bow down to them, serve them, or sacrifice to them, but the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt with mighty power and outstretched arm is the one you must worship. To him you shall bow down, and to him offer sacrifices. You must always be careful to keep the decrees and regulations, the laws and commands he wrote for you. Do not worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I have made with you, and do not worship other gods. Rather, worship the Lord your God. It is he who will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies." But they would not listen, however, but persisted in their former practices. Even while these children were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. To this day, their children and grandchildren continued to do as their ancestors did. In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nebuchadnezzar. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands the Lord had given Moses, and the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. From watchtower to fortified city, he defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory. In King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Halah, in Gozan, on the harbor river, and in towns of the Medes. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord their God, but had violated his covenant, all that Moses the servant of the Lord commanded. They neither listened to the command, nor carried them out. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish: "I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand of me." The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold with which he had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord and gave it to the king of Assyria. I just want to check something real quick before we continue reading. The king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. They called for the king, and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shibna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. The field commander said to them, "Tell Hezekiah, This is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have the counsel and the might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, I know you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff, which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it, such as Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him. But if you say to me, we are depending on the Lord our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you can put riders on them. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you are depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, have I come to attack and destroy this place without word from the Lord? The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to the field commander, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people on the wall. But the commander replied, was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things? And not to the people sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their own excrements, and drink their own urine. Then the commander stood and called out in Hebrew, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, the Lord will surely deliver us. The city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine and fig tree and drink water from your own cistern, until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life and not death. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for he is misleading you when he says the Lord will deliver us. Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they rescued Samaria from my hand? Who of all the gods of these countries has been able to save his land for me? How then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? But the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, do not answer him. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and Joash, son of Asaph, the recorder, went to Hezekiah, with their clothes torn, and told him what the field commander had said. It's getting intense. I should have named this video the Assyrian Exile. Or Assyria exiles Israel. Because that would have been more fitting than just simply Hezekiah. I named it Hezekiah, but who knows. Going all the way back to 13. That was a good read, though. I really loved it. I didn't like what happened to the people, but it's getting. This is a real interesting part of the Bible. I really like when it's like the kings and prophets. That's one of my favorite parts of the Bible. Prophets start coming in, but verse 4 to 6 of chapter 13 says, Then Jehoaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before, but they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. They continued in them. Also the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. The Lord heard Jehoaz's prayer for help. God delayed his judgment on Israel when the people turned to him, but they did not sustain their dependence on God for long. Although the Israelites had seasons of repentance from their idol worship, they rarely showed genuine faith. It is not enough to say no to sin. We must also say yes to a life of commitment to God. An occasional call for help is not a substitute for a daily life of trust in God. Aram, which lay to the north of Israel, was always Israel's enemy. This was partly because Israel blocked most of Aram's trade from the south, and Aram cut off most of Israel's from the north. If one nation could conquer the other, all its trade routes would be open and its economy would flourish. Israel and Aram were so busy fighting each other that they didn't notice the rapidly growing strength of the Assyrians to the far north. Soon both nations would be surprised. Why did the people of Israel continue to sin? They had God's laws passed down from Moses, continuous warnings from God's prophets, and a long history of God's faithfulness to them. Yet they were prone to follow and worship other gods. What was the attraction? The false gods were worshipped with tangible idols of metal, wood, or stone. The true God is invisible and transcendent. The false gods were closely tied to weather and cycles of life. Grain, better crops of livestock, fertility and success in war seemed to be tangible benefits of either sacrificing to the gods or making requests of them, even though it wasn't them who answered. Like, they aren't even real. They can't speak, can't hear, they can't see. False gods could supposedly be appeased by money, food, or sacrifices. They had few moral requirements and no call for love or heartfelt devotion. Right living was not required. The gods offered sexual benefits, power, and success. They had no restraints on sinful human nature, calls for justice, or generosity. After many years, these idolatrous practices became a way of life for the people and were passed down to children and future generations. Thus, idol worship became the new tradition. Verse 9 to 10 says, Jehoaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and Jehoash his son succeeded him as king. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. Jehoash, you want to guess what he is also called? Joash, not as in the Joash, the 7-year-old king who reigned for a long time, but a different Jehoash. Jehoash is also called Joash. Pretty funny that he was also living during the reign of another Joash, but the names is really confusing. You got Joash, Jehoash, Jehoaz, Jehu, all of it's J, Jeroboam, Judah, all of it's just J. I think most of the names in the Bible probably start with A and J, I'm gonna be honest. But Jehoash, also called Joash, assumed the throne of Israel in 798 BC. At that time, the king of Judah, also named Joash, was nearing the end of his reign. In Hebrew, Jehoash and Joash are two forms of the same name. Thus, two kings named with the same name, one in the south and one in the north, reigned at approximately the same time. While Joash of Judah began as a good king, Joash of Israel was evil throughout his reign. Jehoash, aka Joash, a different Joash. That's really confusing. Verse 14 says, Now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. Jehoash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, he cried, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. Elisha was highly regarded for his prophetic powers and miracles on Israel's behalf. When Jehoash said the chariots and horsemen of Israel, he was paying tribute to Elisha by comparing him to Elijah. Those were the very words that Elisha had said when Elisha was taken up to heaven. Jehoash feared Elisha's death because he ascribed his nation's well-being to Elisha rather than the God. Jehoash's fear reveals his lack of spiritual understanding. At least 43 years had passed since Elisha was last mentioned in Scripture, when he anointed Jehu king. Jehoash's reign began in 798 BC. Big gap. And then Elisha tells Jehoash, to strike the ground. And Jehoash does it 3 times, and Elisha's like, you should have done it 5 or 6 times, so all of Aram's defeated. When Jehoash was told to strike the ground with the arrows, he did it only half-heartedly. As a result, Elisha told the king that his victory over Aram would be incomplete. Receiving the full benefits of God's plan for our lives requires us to receive and obey his commands fully. If we don't follow God's complete instructions, we should not be surprised that we don't receive his full benefits and blessings. Verse 20 to 21 says, Elisha died and was buried, and Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. Once, while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of soldiers. Band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. Elisha was dead, but his powerful influence remained, even causing miracles after his death. This demonstrated that Elisha was indeed a prophet of God. It also attested to God's power. No pagan idol had ever raised anyone from the dead. This miracle served as one more reminder to the people of Israel that they had gone the wrong way when they had rejected God's words as given through Elisha. Chapter 14, verse 7 says, He was the one who defeated 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and captured Selah in battle, calling it Joktheel, the name it has to this day. Selah was the ancient stronghold of Petra, a city carved into a rock cliff, which is now Jordan. It was not only a stronghold for Edom, but also a wealthy outpost for trade with India through its nearby ports on the Red Sea. Verse 9 to 10 says, But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah, a thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a setter in Lebanon, Give your daughter to my son in marriage. Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle underfoot. You have indeed defeated Edom, and now you are arrogant. glory in your victory, but stay at home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall and that of Judah also? This parable compares Judah to a small thistle. King Amaziah of Judah had become proud after defeating the Edomites, where he was trying to pick a fight with Israel because he was sure his army was stronger than theirs. Jehoash tried to warn Amaziah not to attack by comparing his army to a thistle and Israel's army to a cedar tree. Amaziah had overrated his strength. His ambition was greater than his ability. He didn't listen to Jehoash and was soundly defeated. Verse 13 says, find it. Wow. Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh. Then Jehoash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section about 400 cubits long. A broken down city wall not only disgraced the citizens, but also left them with defenseless against future invasions. But verse 25 says, he was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-hepher. During this period of history, many prophets such as Hosea, Amos, Jonah, Micah, and Isaiah began collecting their prophecies and writing them under God's direction. They continue to preach about the worldwide significance of God's work as they look forward to God's future spiritual kingdom. God would use Israel's moral and spiritual decline to prepare the way for the Messiah's coming, because the kingdom and military power of Israel would be stripped away. Many people would be ready to turn to the good news that Jesus would bring. And Jonah's mentioned here, same Jonah, by the way, that we read about in the book of Jonah. Verse 26 to 27 says, the Lord has seen how bitterly everyone in Israel, whether slave or free, was suffering. There was no one to help them. And since the Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. Israel had become an evil and immoral nation, and the people's sins would get even worse. However, God did not want to destroy Israel. Instead, he warned that judgment was certain if Israel didn't turn back to him. In his mercy, God gave the people of Israel yet another chance to turn away from their evil ways. Unfortunately, the next 5 kings of Israel responded to God's mercy with disobedience. They were so evil that God allowed the nation to be destroyed by Assyria. Verse 28 says, as for the other events of Jeroboam's reign, all he did and his military achievements, including how he recovered from Israel both Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are they not written in the book of the Annals of the kings of Israel? Jeroboam II had no devotion to God, yet under his warlike policies and skillful administration, Israel enjoyed more national power and material prosperity than at any time since the days of Solomon. The prophets Hosea and Amos, however, tell us what was really happening within the kingdom. Jeroboam's administration ignored policies of justice and fairness. As a result, the rich became richer and the poor poorer. The people became self-centered, relying more on their power, security, and possessions than on God. The poor were so oppressed that it was hard for them to believe God noticed their plight. Material prosperity is not always an indication of God's blessing. It can also be a result of self-centeredness and blind ambition. If you're experiencing prosperity, you know that God holds us accountable for how we attain success and how we use our wealth. Everything we have really belongs to him. We must use God's gift with his interest in mind. Chapter 15, verse 1, which says, in the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. Azariah was also known as Uzziah. His story is given in greater detail in 2 Chronicles chapter 26. He's also mentioned in Isaiah chapter 1 and chapter 6. Before the beginning of Azariah's reign, Israel broke down 600 feet of Jerusalem's walls after defeating Judah and carrying off their king. Amaziah, but during Azariah's 52-year reign, Judah rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem, refortified the city with anti-siege weapons, and gained independence from Israel. Azariah's devotion to God helped Judah enjoy peace and prosperity such as it had not experienced since the days of Solomon. During this time, however, Israel declined drastically and would soon be overthrown. Verse 4 says, the high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Although Azariah accomplished a great deal, he failed to destroy the high places, the locations of pagan shrines in Judah, just as his father Amaziah and grandfather Joash had failed to do. Azariah imitated the kings he had heard stories about and had watched while growing up. Although Azariah's father and grandfather were basically good kings, they were poor models for wholehearted submission to God and devoted worship to Him. To rise above the influence of poor models, we must seek better ones. Christ provides a perfect model for living in complete submission and service to God and others. No matter how you were raised or who has influenced your life, you can move beyond those limitations by taking Christ as your example and consciously trying to live as He did. Verse 5 says, "The Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, and he lived in a separate house. Jotham the king's son had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land." For 10 years, Jotham was the co-ruler with his father, Azariah. A father and son would rule together for any of the following reasons. The father was very old and needed help. The father wanted to train his son in leading the nation, or the father was sick or exiled. Many co-rulers during the period of the kings: Asa, Jehoshaphat, again another Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Azariah, Jotham, Jehoash, Jeroboam II, and Hezekiah and Manasseh. Oh wait, I should have said that differently. Here are the co-rulers and the kings. Kings, co-rulers: Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Azariah, Jotham, Jehoash, and Jeroboam II. And finally, Hezekiah, Manasseh. Those are the kings and co-rulers. First is king, second is co-ruler, by the way. Verse 8 to 9 says, "In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 6 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his predecessors had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit." I don't know why I tried to read it that fast, but Zechariah was an evil king because he encouraged Israel to sin by worshipping idols. Sin in our lives is serious, but it is even more serious to encourage others to disobey God. We are responsible for the way we influence others. Beware of other sins with double impact, ones that not only hurt you but also hurt others by encouraging them to sin. That's talked in James, and we talked about that in James. Like, we should be good teachers, because if we mislead people, higher judgment will be placed on us. Verse 10 says, "Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah. He attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king." Zechariah was warned by the prophet Amos of his impending death and the subsequent end of Jeroboam's dynasty. Verse 14 says, "Then Menahem, son of Gadi, went from Tirzah up to Samaria. He attacked Shallum, son of Jabesh, in Samaria, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king." Ancient historical documents say that Menahem was the commander-in-chief of Jeroboam's army. After Jeroboam's son was assassinated, Menahem probably saw himself and not Shallum as the rightful successor to Israel's throne. Verse 18 says, "He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit." I cannot tell you how many times we have repeated that same phrase. But Menahem, like the kings before him, led his people into sin. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but a horrible epitaph leader. Leaders profoundly affect the people they serve. They can either encourage or discourage devotion to God, both by their example and by the structure they give their organizations. Good leaders tear down obstacles to faith in God and encourage people toward right living. Verse 19 and 20 says, "Then Pul, king of Assyria, invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom." Menahem exacted this money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer. When King Pul of Assyria, also called Tiglath-Pileser, in chapter 15, verse 29, took the throne, the Assyrian Empire was becoming a world power, and the nations of Aram, Israel, and Judah were in decline. This is the first mention of Assyria in 2 Kings. Pul's invasion occurred in 743 BC. Assyria made Israel a vassal state, and Menahem was forced to pay tribute to Assyria. This was the first of 3 Assyrian invasions. Verse 30 says, "Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. He attacked and assassinated him, and then succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah." Hoshea was the last king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Verse 32 says, In the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Amaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. A year after Pekah became king, Uzziah, also called Azariah of Judah, died, and Isaiah the prophet had a vision of God's holiness and Israel's future destruction. This is talked about in Isaiah 6, which we'll read after Jeremiah. Verse 34 to 35 says, He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. Much good can be said of Jotham and his reign as king of Judah, but he failed in a most important area. He didn't destroy the pagan hilltop shrines or high places, although leaving them clearly violated the first commandment. Like Jotham, we may live basically good lives and yet miss doing what is most important. A lifetime of doing good is not enough if we make the crucial mistakes of not following God with all our hearts. A true follower of God puts him first in all areas of life. Verse 3 of chapter 16 says, find it. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. No, wait, I skipped over a few things. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and even sacrificed his son in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. Ahaz was so depraved that he sacrificed his own son on an altar to the pagan gods. This was a practice of the Canaanites, whom the Israelites were supposed to have driven out from the land. Israel and Aram were both under Assyria's control during this time. They joined forces against Judah, hoping to force the southern kingdom to join their revolt against Assyria and strengthen their western alliance. But the plan backfired when King Ahaz of Judah unexpectedly asked Assyria to come to his aid. Evil King Ahaz copied pagan religious customs, changed the temple services, and used the temple altar for his personal benefit. In so doing, he demonstrated a callous disregard for God's commands. We condemn Ahaz for his action, but we act the same way if we try to mold God's message to fit our personal preferences. We must worship God for who he is, not what we would selfishly like him to be. Verse 10 says, When King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, he saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar which detailed plans for its constructions. Ahaz went to Damascus to express gratitude and loyalty to Tiglath-Pileser. Ahaz was afraid of a southern sweep because the Assyrians had captured Damascus, the capital of Aram, in 732 BC, but he was relying more on money than on God to keep the powerful king out of his land, and his plan failed. Although Tiglath-Pileser did not conquer Judah, he caused much trouble, and Ahaz regretted asking for his help. Ahaz replaced the altar of burnt offering, the bronze altar, with a replica of the pagan altar after he had He replaced the bronze altar, the burnt offering altar, with a replica of the pagan altar he had seen in Damascus. The altar of burnt offering was not thrown out, but was kept for use in divination. The sacrifices were washed in the basins. The sea was a huge reservoir of water for temple use. This was extremely serious because God had given specific directions on how the altar should look and be used. Building this new altar was like installing an idol, but because Judah was Assyria's vassal state, Ahaz was eager to please the Assyrian king. Sadly, Ahaz allowed the king of Assyria to replace God as Judah's leader. No one, no matter how attractive or powerful, should replace God's leadership in our lives. Verse 18 says, He took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple and removed the royal entryway outside the temple of the Lord in deference to the king of Assyria. Ahaz had become a weak king with a weak and compromising high priest. Judah's religious system was in shambles. It now included pagan customs, and its chief aim was only to please those in power. If our primary focus is to avoid offending others by agreeing with everything they say and do, we risk making them more important than God in our lives and adopting a worldview that conflicts with God's word. Verse 3 to 4, chapter 17 says, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack Hoshea, who had been Shalmaneser's vassal and had paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea was a traitor, for he had sent envoys to So, king of Egypt, and he no longer paid tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore, Shalmaneser seized him and put him in prison. This was probably Shalmaneser the fifth. He from 727 BC to 722 BC. That's not when he was born. That's when he reigned. Who had become king of Assyria after Tiglath-Pileser. He continued to demand heavy tribute from Israel. Israel's king Hoshea decided to rebel against Assyria and join forces with King So of Egypt. This war not only foolish but also against God's commands. This was not only foolish, I meant to say. I said war. I'm a little tired, but this was not only foolish but also against God's commands. To destroy this alliance, Shalmaneser attacked and besieged Samaria for 3 years. Just before Samaria fell, however, Shalmaneser died. His successor, Sargon II, took credit for capturing the city, destroying the nation of Israel, and carrying away its people. Sargon is a crazy name. Verse 5 or 6 says, the king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halak, Gozan, on the harbor river, and in the towns of the Medes. This was Assyria's third and final invasion of Israel. The first wave had been merely a warning to the people of Israel to avoid further attack. They were required to pay money and not rebel. At that point, the people should have learned their lesson and returned to God. When they didn't, God had allowed Assyria to invade again, this time carrying off some captives from the northern border. But the people still did not realize that they had caused their own troubles. Thus, Assyria invaded for the third and final time, completely destroying the northern kingdoms of Israel, carrying away most of the people and resettling the land with foreigners. Really sucks. God was doing what he said he would do in Deuteronomy chapter 28. He had given Israel ample warning. They should have known what would come, but they ignored God and his law. Israel was now no better than the pagan nations it had destroyed in the days of Joshua. God's people had turned sour and rejected their original purpose, to honor God and be a light to the world. The Lord judged the people of Israel because they had copied the evil customs of the surrounding nations, worshipping false gods, accommodating pagan customs, and following their own desires. Those who created their own religion tend to live selfishly and to live for oneself. As the people of Israel learn, it brings serious consequences from God. Sometimes following God is difficult and painful, but consider the alternative. You can live for God or die for yourself. Determine to be God's person and do what he says regardless of the cost. What God thinks of you is infinitely more important than what those around you think. Verse 9 says, the Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. Ruin came upon Israel for the people's public sins and their secret sins. Not only did they condone wickedness and idolatry in public, but they also committed even worse sins in private, taking idols into their homes and towns. Secret sins are the ones we don't want others to know about because they are embarrassing or incriminating. Sins done in private are not secret to God, though, and secret defiance of him is just as damaging as open rebellion. You should be ashamed of open rebellion, and especially ashamed of private rebellion. Verse 13 to 15. Oh, it talks about that in Ezekiel, when God takes Ezekiel and puts this wall opens up, and the people in there saying, the Lord has forsaken us, he no longer answers us. And then God takes Ezekiel to another place, and people not facing the temple, facing opposite the temple, and bowing down to the sun. We'll get to that when we read Ezekiel. That's going to be the second to last book we read, by the way. That's the book we're reading for Revelations. That's going to prepare us for Revelations, to be honest. Ezekiel's crazy. I think I put two of the most disturbing books together. Ezekiel is a real uncomfortable book at times. If you know what I mean, you know. And Revelations can be quite scary for some people. I don't find it scary. I find it to be joyful because it brings hope. But for those who are unfaithful, it could be really scary. But I pray that you are not unfaithful, and I pray that you are faithful, knowing that Revelations, when that time comes, that you won't be taken into hellfire, but you will be raptured with God. You will be caught up in the sky with Jesus Christ. That's, There's no need to fear revelations, really. If you're very faithful, there's really no need to fear. Verse 13 to 15 says, the Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers. Turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants the prophets. But they would not listen, and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors and the statutes that he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. The people took on the characteristics of the idols and imitated the godless nations around them. They had forgotten the importance and benefits of obeying God's word. The king and the people had become mired in wickedness. Time and again, God has sent prophets to warn them of how far they had turned away from him and to call them to turn back. God's patience and mercy are beyond our ability to understand. He will pursue us until we either respond to him or by our own choice and hardness of heart make ourselves unreachable. The God's judgment will be swift and short. The only right decision is to turn to God before our stubbornness puts us out of his reach. Your stubbornness will kill you. That is no joke. Verse 16 says, they forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves two idols cast in the shape of cows and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry host and they worshipped Baal. The starry host refers to the sun, moon, and constellations, which were the objects of pagan worship practices. This verse is referring to Assyrian gods that were being added to the Israelites' religion. We were just talking about that. We were talking about we were talking about Ezekiel, dude. We were talking about how Ezekiel was showing people like opposite of the temple worshiping the sun. That's funny. Verse 17 says, they sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. Divination is determining the future by means of witchcraft, and sorcery is consulting evil spirits. God had forbidden witchcraft, fortune-telling, and black magic. They were sinful because using them meant seeking power and guidance totally apart from God, his law, and the words of his prophets. Isaiah echoed this law and prophesied of the complete destruction these occult practices would bring to those who participated in them. Today, people sometimes consult horoscopes, tarot cards, crystals, and Ouija boards for advice. Such practices should be avoided by Christians. Not only are they against God's law, but they also open the door to Satan's influences. And if you've ever seen a horror movie, you don't ever want to mess with divination. Verse 23, most horror movies aren't even real. Verse 23 says, until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants, the prophets, so the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. Israel was taken into exile just as God's prophets had warned. Whatever God wills and says will come to pass. This, of course, is good news to those who trust and obey him. Hey, we were just talking about that when we were talking about Revelations. Wow. They can be confident of his promises. But it is bad news to those who ignore and disobey him. Both the promises and warnings God has given in his word will surely come true. Verse 24 says, the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cuthah, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim. Moving the Israelites out and moving foreigners in was Assyria's resettlement policy to prevent revolt. Spreading the Israelite captives across the Assyrian Empire prevented their uniting and repopulating Israel with foreign captives made it difficult for the remaining Israelites to unite as well. This mixture of people resettled in Israel came to be known as Samaritans. They were despised by the Jews even at the times of Christ. The new settlers in Israel worshipped God without giving up their pagan customs. They worshipped God to appease him rather than to please him, treating him as a good luck charm or just another idol to add to their collection. A similar attitude is common today. Many people claim to believe in God by refusing to give up attitudes and actions that God denounces. God cannot be added to the values we already have. He must come first, and his word must shape all our actions and attitudes. You can't live in public for God, but then also live in private for Satan. You can't live in public for Satan, but also live in private for God. You only have one master, Alright? As Jesus says, you can't have two masters, or you will end up following only one and disowning the other. And I'm going to tell you, you do not want to disown God, because you will be disowned in front of all his angels, before his Son and the Father too. Israel was conquered because the people had lost sight of the only true God and the importance of following him. When conquering the land, the Israelites were told to destroy the idolatrous influences that could lead them away from God. Their failure to do so brought about their ruin. Here they faced an even greater influx of God from the many pagan peoples moving into the land. It's like, it just gets horrible for them, man. Really, it's like, when I first read this, it was like, really sad, to be honest. It was really a sad moment for Israel, dude. It's like, it felt really, like, have you ever like, I like to call it the apocalyptic feeling, where it feels like the end, or like a very dreadful feeling is coming. And I like to refer to that as the apocalyptic feeling, because I usually get it when I'm like reading Ezekiel, or Isaiah, Jeremiah, or Joel, or Revelations, or even Thessalonians, you know. And I get it whenever I read those books, and it feels like this dreadful feeling, like, oh man, these people are going through a bad time. Like it's like you're feeling the fear they felt. It's weird. It's I don't know. I mean, I read the Bible. Of course, the Bible's like the book that has affected me emotionally the most. And like when I read it, sometimes I feel the feelings that some people are going through in it, because I become so spiritually attached to God. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to become very spiritually attached to God. And it's like I start feeling those feelings. Like in Ezekiel, there's some very disgusting imagery, and I believe God uses that imagery to describe his disgust for Israel's sins. And because, like, I know sin is bad, and the sins that Israel and Judah were doing was horrible, it made me disgusted as well. And the imagery just made it even more disgusting, to be honest. But I believe God uses imagery to describe things to us, and not just in visions and dreams, but in ways to show his emotions as well. Because a lot of people believe that God is this almighty man whose emotions cannot be affected, but he cried for us. He loved us so much that he died on the cross. He has emotions, and a lot of people believe God is just some serious, wrathful man, not some, emotionful person. But he is an emotional God. He is full of emotion, and that's why he sent Jesus. So, because he had so much grace, so much love, he had so much happiness in knowing that a lot of people would come to him. He also has so much sadness that a lot of people will leave from him. So I think God uses imagery to describe his emotion to us so we can understand him better. And I believe he did that a lot in Ezekiel and a lot in the prophets, especially to Ezekiel. If you ever read Ezekiel goes through some crap. I'm telling you, he has to lay on the side 100 days. He has to eat food over some dung. It's crazy. His wife died, and God told Ezekiel not to mourn for her. And the people were like, why the heck are you doing this, Ezekiel? And he was doing it to show what God was about to do to Jerusalem, what God used Babylon as a weapon of destruction, as a punishment against Israel's sins. And okay. We're getting off track from 2 Kings, but I mean, I love it. Whenever you're very spiritually and emotionally attached to God, it's a good thing. And I encourage you to do that. A good way to do it is spending time in prayer. Every time I spend time in prayer, I feel different. It doesn't feel like I'm in this world. It feels like I'm being raised up, and I feel elevated, and it's the greatest feeling I've ever felt in my life. I love to feel it, and I believe that's the feeling of the Holy Spirit. And I've felt it many times, even when I'm not praying. When I'm feeling it right now. I'm feeling God right now. One time I was in church, and I just had this weird feeling in my, body was telling me, go pray on that altar. And when I go and kneel down at this altar, I was filled with this odd joy. It wasn't like this joy where you get up and you're like, yeah, yes. It was just joy where your whole body was just, I'm in a great moment. I'm in a calm state. It's a calm joy, not a giddy joy, but it's like the best kind of joy you can feel. It's like it's the God Jesus joy. That's what it is. We're gonna get back to 2 Kings now though. But yeah, get emotionally and spiritually attached to God. That's a good way to get closer to Him. Verse 4, chapter 18 says, if I can find it, he removed the high places, smashed the sacred altars, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nehushtan. The bronze snake had been made to cure the Israelites of the bite of venomous snakes. It had demonstrated God's presence and power and had reminded the people of His mercy and forgiveness. But it had become an object of worship instead of a reminder of whom to worship. So Hezekiah was forced to destroy it. We must be careful that aids to our worship don't become objects of worship themselves. Most objects are not made to be idols; they become idols by the way people use them. Verse 5 says that Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah. In dramatic contrast to his father Ahaz, Hezekiah followed God more closely and sincerely than any other king of Judah or Israel. This statement refers to the kings after the division of the kingdom, and so does not include David, considered the king most devoted to God. I want that David kind of devotion. I need to achieve that too. Verse 7 says, and the king was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. Judah was sandwiched between two world powers, Egypt and Assyria. Both wanted to control Judah and Israel because they lay at the vital crossroads of all trade in the ancient Middle East. The nation that controlled Judah would have a military and economic advantage over its rivals. When Hezekiah became king, Assyria controlled Judah. Acting with great courage, Hezekiah rebelled against this mighty empire to whom his father had submitted. He placed his faith in God's strength rather than his own, and he obeyed God's commands in spite of the obstacles and dangers that from a purely human standpoint looked overwhelming. Verse 9 to 12 says, in King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of 3 years, the Assyrians took it, so Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Halah, and Gozan on the harbor river, and in the towns of the Medes. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord their God, but had violated his covenant. All that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, they neither listened to his commands nor carried them out. These verses flashes back to the days just before Israel's destruction. Hezekiah reigned with his father Ahaz for 14 years, from 729 BC to 715 BC, by himself for 18 years, 715 BC to 697 BC, and with his son Manasseh for 11 years, 697 BC to 686 BC. A total of 43 years. The 29 years listed here indicate only those years in which Hezekiah had control of the kingdom. While Hezekiah was on the throne, the nation of Israel to the north was destroyed in 722 BC. Knowing Israel's fate probably caused Hezekiah to reform his own nation. Verse 13 says, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. This event occurred in 701 BC. 4 years after Sennacherib had become Assyria's king, Sennacherib was the son of Sargon II, the king who had deported Israel's people into captivity. To keep Assyria from attacking, the southern kingdom paid tribute annually. But when Sennacherib became king, Hezekiah stopped paying this money, hoping Assyria would ignore him. When Sennacherib and his army retaliated, Hezekiah realized his mistake and paid the tribute money. But Sennacherib attacked anyway. Although Sennacherib attacked Judah, he was not as war-hungry as the previous Assyrian kings, preferring to spend most of his time building up and beautifying his capital city, Nineveh. With less frequent invasions, Hezekiah was able to institute many reforms and strengthen the nation. Finally, verse 17 says, the king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct at the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. Sending the supreme commander, the chief officer, and the field commander was like sending the vice president, the secretary of state, and the head general of the army to speak to the enemy prior to a battle. All of these men were set in an effort to impress and discourage the Israelites. There you go. That's chapters 13 and 18. Next will be... Is it Amos we're reading next? If it's Amos we're reading next, it will be Amos chapters 1 to 5. If it's Hosea, I'm not sure. Hosea would be one video because it's 3 chapters. Micah would be 4 chapters and then 3 chapters. I think it's Amos. Chapters 1 to 5 of Amos, I think. But, yeah. Become emotionally and spiritually attached to God because it helps you grow in a relationship with Him very much. Like I said earlier, it's the greatest joy you could ever have because, whenever you share your emotions with God, God shares His with yours. And it's not like... Now, that sounds confusing, but it's like... Because, like how 1 John says somewhere, because He loved, we love as well. That's what I mean when I say that He shares His emotions with yours. You start loving, you start caring, you start feeling joy because God is in your life now. And when you're emotionally and spiritually attached with Him, you just only grow closer and you grow this big, awesome, deeper connection with Him. And it's not like someone who goes to church Sunday connection. It's someone who spends time with Him every day kind of connection, not leaving an ounce of prayer outside of the relationship. If that makes sense. Like, what I meant, like, constantly praying to Him pretty much. And it's really hard for some people to pray constantly. And I try, like, I'm trying now to pray constantly. And it's difficult because, you have the enemy trying to attack you with temptations. And so you have, like, this spiritual conflict going on inside your spirit. But if you're praying constantly, that just strengthens you. That God strengthens you because you pray constantly, and that God sends His spiritual army against Satan's temptations and makes them flee from you because you're praying constantly. It helps you a lot. And a good way to do it is just constantly talking to God. And it's easier than it sounds, but it's also hard for some people. Sometimes you may not hear Him. Sometimes you will hear Him, whether it's through verses, whether it's through other people, or even dreams and visions sometimes, which, like I said earlier, one time I was standing in church, and I just felt like I needed to pray at the altar, and I went down and kneel, and I felt this eternal pleasure come upon me, like this joy that I've never felt before, and obviously it was God. So, my big message for today, for this video, is become spiritually and emotionally attached to God so you can grow a deeper connection with Him. There's no better thing you can do. Pray to Him constantly, and that's hard to do, but once you begin feeling God in your life, you just want to do it. There's no hardness in it. Like, it's not difficult no more. It's more difficult just to spend time alone than not spend time with God. That makes sense. It's more difficult to spend time alone than spend time with God. It's like you want to keep your mind accompanied by God all the time so you can defend against Satan. You constantly want to pray. Okay, I'm repeating myself at this point, but you get the message. Jewish culture, a repetitive phrase means it's very significant. So it's very significant. That's why I'm repeating it. Anyway. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, I thank you for today. I ask that you pour out your Spirit upon us, Lord. I ask that you show us joy and just love and grace, Lord, because you are not an emotionless God, but you are an emotional God, Lord. You show us your emotions through the imagery you describe to us in the Bible, whether it be disgust or love, Lord. I pray that you show us love. I pray that we don't come across disgust in our life, but I know we will at one point, but you will be in our life during that time, and you will lead us away from disgust, from sorrow, from suffering, from wrath and from anger, Lord, from mourning, Lord. You will lead us into a life that is fruitful and abundant, with joy and happiness forever, Lord. You will lead us into salvation, and you will lead us to your Son, your Lamb, Jesus Christ. I thank you for sending Him. I thank you for the wisdom and understanding that you've been giving us lately, Lord. I thank you for all the blessings you've been giving me, Lord, as well. This house, my parents, my food, my sisters, my bed, the shelter over my head, and most importantly, you. I ask that no one can suffer alone, but I ask that if they are suffering, they suffer joyfully, Lord. I ask that they suffer joyfully, knowing that you will uphold them with your righteous right hand. I ask that if anyone does not have you, they can find you, Lord, and will pursue you forever, Lord. That it won't be a temporary thing, because you are not a phase. You are the life, as you says, and as you say in John chapter 14, verse 6, that you are the life, the way, and the truth. The way, the truth, and the life. I got the verse mixed up. Oopsies. But forgive me. You are not a phase, but you are the life. So I pray that no one just has you for a moment, but they have you forever. I pray that when they rest their head tonight, that they will know that you're resting upon them. That they will wake up in the morning and say, "Good morning, Jesus," and live out their day with you, Lord. I pray that we can all pray constantly, that we can keep on praying with you, Lord, throughout the day, so that we can be on guard from the enemy, Lord. That you will defend us from his angels, from his evil fallen angels, Lord. I pray that you will guard our spirit, our soul. I pray that if anyone doesn't have you, they'll find you, and if they already do have you, that they'll continue to pursue you and pursue others in your name, so your word may be spread out as you told us to. You told us to treasure your word out, called the Great Commission, Lord. So I pray that we can all live in your word, live in obedience and faith to you, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. Holy Spirit, I felt that. Good night. God bless. Love you all.